Well, thank you so much, Olli, for allowing us to interview you, even if it's so late and we're all so hungry. We were thinking about talking about sociology and fiction and their relationship and how you actually work with this diet of sociology and fiction, and how you think that bringing them together might actually be fruitful for our discipline and perhaps beyond.
Yeah. To start with, I think sociology has had an intimate yet very complicated relationship to fiction from the very start, like from the 19th century. And since it has been, in a way, you could think of it as a kind of a third culture between the natural sciences on the one hand and literature on the other. And it has been, in a way, imitating the natural sciences and adopting some literary forms and tropes from literature. So there's been some tension there. And I think what I try to do with social theory and fiction is to, in a way, problematize the dichotomy between the two, in the sense that they can be mutually enriching in many ways. And even beyond that, I think the job of a sociologist and a writer or an author are pretty much the same, or they share similar features in that they try to, in a way, address personal problems and public concerns. This is a kind of a Millsian take on it, and combine social structures with biographies of people and the fates of people, and show that actually how people manage in their lives is not dependent only on themselves, but it's dependent on larger issues, social issues. And I think they can enrich each other in many ways. One is that we could, for instance, theory can be used to think of fiction, to analyze it, interpret it, and so on. And the second way is fiction can be used as a resource or a source of interpretation, and to tell something about society and what actually exists, our actual existing society. But it can only also, in a way, enact new realities. If we think of digital technology combined with neoliberal forms and so on, it actually changes the way we experience things and the way we can relate to other people and so on. Besides those two forms, fiction can be used as a source of theoretical ideas, theoretical insights, and to enrich, challenge, extend, problematize concepts or extend concepts and so on. And I think, like, as a kind of a fourth point to add to that, I think we can also use literal tropes and forms and ways of expression from literature. Say, use the dialogue form, or how Bruno Latour uses in his book Aramis, or The Love of Technology. He uses kind of fictional forms where trains speak and are literally actors or actors there, or how in his book on the pasteurization of France, he uses the model of Dostoevsky's War and Peace to kind of frame the battle between the microbes and the scientists and so on. So there are many opportunities and possibilities, I think.
When you talk about fiction, do you mean literature, or are you also opening the field of fiction for films, even for lyrics of songs or music? If we open it to the end, to the maximum end, I mean, where does fiction that you study end?
Yeah, that's a nice and good interesting question in the sense that it's usually been, I think traditionally, there's a kind of a special field of sociology of literature, but fiction is much wider. You can think of forms of art and forms of popular culture and like comics, music videos, whatever. I don't want to be in a way overly categorical or limited with that. You could use basically any forms of fiction or popular culture, if you like.
And do you think there is a sort of interpenetration between our social experience of life and those products of fiction we consume? So that, of course, these products of fiction extract from our experiences and the experiences of those who create them material matter to become stories, but at the same time, do these stories conform how we keep on experiencing? Or
Yeah. I think the relationship works two ways, in the sense that, of course, when they're being produced, they are not being made up in historical vacuum or anything, but they are, in a way, products of different particular society at a particular point of time in history. So I wouldn't say they reflect the society or the historical point, but they tell something about it, and that's one way of looking at them. But I think they also can, in a way, affect the way we feel and experience things. If we think of, for instance, romantic love, the very notion of romantic love goes to these ballads and love novels and so love stories, songs, and we get those ideas of them, how we actually feel about when we are in love. It's connected to these forms of popular culture, I would say.
I don't know if you have had this experience as a sociologist working with fiction, but sometimes you work hard on a topic and you do your field work and then you read a novel that actually is able to create a small universe in which that which you wanted to research is so wonderfully portrayed that you think you will never match up to that. Has it ever, I mean...
It most certainly has. And the French philosopher Michel Serres has this wonderful idea, which I really, really enjoy and like, is that sometimes fiction can actually go deeper than philosophy or social theory could ever go. But you need theory or philosophy to actually tell in which ways it goes deeper than philosophy or social theory. And that actually happened to me when I was writing my book, The Gift and Its Paradoxes. I was watching some movies, for instance, the film The Beach directed by Danny Boyle, and I realized that here are the sort of relations regarding the gift and the parasitic relations, in a way describe and put well better than I could ever put it myself in the language of social theory. And that gave me the idea of actually doing it in each and every chapter. So in a way, I wanted to put social theory and popular forms of popular culture on a par, so to speak, on the same foot level, and not use forms of popular culture as a kind of materials or data, but rather with something to think with, and to make no sort of categorical distinction between whether this is work of fiction or work of philosophy or social theory, that actually you can get insights and notions and ideas and stories and narratives from fiction telling about something essential about what is a gift and what it is to give a gift and what it is to receive one, what is accepted of a person when one receives a gift and so on. So it was kind of a, also making a kind of a writing experiment to sort of make the author of the text to dissolve, so it's not that obvious to who gives the idea. Is it the social theorist or the author of the book or some character in a movie or so?
So that's where the relational paradigm comes into the picture.
Yeah, true.
And just as a last question, I mean, you approach this sociology of fiction, or this fictional sociology, or this sociology inspired by, in a way, by Mill's sociological imagination, but you do it in a relational way. I mean, departing from a viewpoint very strongly, I would say, formed by relationality. Yeah. How does this affect the way you look at fiction?
Well, I will start with how I think about imagination. Whereas Mills, in a way, located it within the heads of the social analyst or people, subjects, I think imagination takes part in between, in relations. And it's not the kind of property or faculty or quality of a subject, but it in a way takes place in a relational field. And I think, I don't know whether I can actually say how it affects my take on fiction so much, but it relates to how I think about the role of imagination, or the imagination part in the sociological imagination. Since I think what Mills was mostly focused on was the sociology part in it, but I think he didn't put that much effort or that much emphasis on looking at what's the role of imagination in sociological thinking. And that is something I would really like to pursue further. And one of the ways of doing it is to look at the ways or intersections of theory and fiction. But there are other ways of doing it as well.
Well, I thank you very, very much for this interview.
Thank you.
And we're so looking forward to this special section to be able to read more on that matter. Thank you, Olli.